AWA Championship Wrestling. The AWA presents the greatest stars in professional wrestling, bringing you the best in mat action.
From the Showboat Casino and Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is AWA Championship Wrestling on ESPN. I'm Larry Nelson, and with me again this week, General Manager of the Showboat, the lovely Judy Moore. I want to talk to you first of all about some things you have coming up. Now, we have boxing and wrestling in March?
That's correct. We've got to get a date for wrestling. It hasn't been set yet, but Greg and I will get together after the match and have a date for March. Okay,
we'll be here, and so will the boxers. I want to talk to you about a fellow you've got in the audience over here from the Mills brothers. I think that's Herb Mills sitting over there. He's here tonight.
Herb's here for every event we have. Hello, Herbie. He wants to get in the ring.
Herb Mills in the wrestling ring. Certainly conquered the field of music for many, many years. Now, in the opening bout tonight, a fella from San Antonio, Texas named Shawn Michaels.
Well, certainly he's going to win. Anybody from Texas is a real winner.
We also should mention that Judy's hometown is San Antonio, Texas. Also on the card tonight, Curt Hennig and Marty Jannetty, a couple of great wrestlers.
That's correct. Last week they put on a good performance, and they will again this week.
And I might also add the big guy, 375 pounds, 6'4", Leon Baby Bull White, former Los Angeles Ram, is here. And Stan the Lariat Hansen would have been the heavyweight championship of the world against David Sammartino. And that is all coming up tonight. Stay right where you are. AWA Championship Wrestling on ESPN from the Showboat. We'll be right back.
Backbone Wrestling Network. Welcome to this episode of Territorial. I am your host, Shawn Kidd, and this week's episode is a very unique one. As you do research for this podcast, YouTube is one of my favorite places to look as I do research. And you come across some things that sometimes surprise you, sometimes shock you, some that you know exist, some that you don't know exist. The one we're going to cover tonight really stood out to me for a number of reasons. And I'm going to get accused of a couple of things I get accused of. One, I get accused of hating things like Ricky Steamboat, Macho Man. I have a real niche for 1987. I also get accused of certain things when it comes to the AWA, mostly around Larry Zbyszko, but AWA in general, because I do enjoy the AWA. It's got some good old school wrestling if you like old school wrestling. But this one, I was doing research for another episode of the pod that we're doing, and I came across an episode of AWA on ESPN from March 11th, 1986. Now, very random. It's 3 days before my 13th birthday, which had nothing to do with what I was looking for. But when you looked at the card, and on YouTube, you can click on, what it says and then show what's in it. And then I went back and I did some research on it, things like Cage Match, Wikipedia, and things like that. And it's the March 11th, 1986 ESPN AWA show, TV show. And some of the stuff in this that I'm about to review with you is really, I don't want to say mind-blowing, but really, really interesting, and the things that they had, what they could have done, and just kind of took me out a little bit. So let me go ahead and kind of intro for you. So you heard the intro from Larry Nelson with the person from the Showboat. They brought up the guy, Herb Mills, who's there. Some jazz guy, I guess, who's at a Herb Mills band or whatever. Not a real celebrity. But the first match they have up tonight, they kind of frameworked for you what was on the card tonight. And when you really think about this card, Shawn Michaels, who I'll get to in a minute, there's a tag team match, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but really the main event of this show. The main event, David Sammartino versus Stan Hansen, that's what clicked for me. Because if you look at the date, 1986, Sammartino had traditionally been in the WWF. He'd worked there with his father and yada, yada, yada. Well, in the course of this, what I discovered is that Sammartino left the WWF and purposely lost a match to a jobber on Prism TV named Ron Shaw, and he left really, really quickly after that. So I never even knew that David Sammartino went to the AWA. Well, when you see that he's taken on Stan Hansen for the World Heavyweight Championship, and knowing the history of Hansen and his father, where Hansen broke his father's neck, it's really interesting that this match kind of is there, but nobody really ever talks about it. Nobody ever hears about it. And I really wanted to see how the AWA handled this match. So that's why we're going to cover this episode. So all said, AWA 3/11/1986, Sammartino versus Hansen. Pretty cool main event in retrospect if you think historical value, but we'll talk about that when we get to the match. But anyway, you heard the intro. So up first is Michaels. And they talk about Shawn Michaels in commentary being by the way, on commentary, even bigger. Ken Resnick, who many of you would remember from the 80s as the behind-the-scenes guy, was kind of like an Okerlund, doing interviews with wrestlers in the WWF. And Greg Gagne's on commentary. And on commentary, they talk about Michaels being the Central States Wrestler of the Year. He wrestled in Central States Wrestling for quite a while. He worked at Mid-South. He even did some appearances at World Class. And so, yeah, because I think in World Class, he had a match against Billy Jack Haynes that's pretty well known. He had a match against Ted DiBiase that's pretty well known. So Michaels has definitely been around. But this year, he was a Central States Wrestling Wrestler of the Year. And this is actually Shawn Michaels' TV debut in the AWA. So this is historical value number one. Shawn Michaels' AWA debut on television. And he's taken on Doug Summer. And if you know about Summers, him and Michaels were in one of the most infamous tag team feuds of 1986 when one was in the Rockers. And Doug Summers was tag team with Buddy Rose. And that feud would start very, very shortly after this match. But they are taking on each other in a singles match. And at this point, I think Doug, for the most part, had been kind of a jobber to the stars a little bit. They even mentioned in commentary the week before he took on Scott Hall, who obviously would become Razor Ramon. So Doug Summers here, back-to-back weeks, taking on the two guys who would have a very famous ladder match for the Intercontinental title, very, very young in their career. But anyway, Michaels here looks very generic as we talk about the match. Gagne says he should be in a circus because of his flashy moves. And like I said, these two would go on to be one of the greatest tag team feuds of 1986 with their respective partners over the AWA World Tag Team titles. But this match was clearly set to get Michaels over. Short match. Michaels wins with a splash off the top. Really solid semi-squash match, probably a 1.5 star TV match. And then they go to an interview, and we're going to play the audio of this interview. What's funny about this interview is they spell Shawn S-E-A-N, and as you know, they go on to Shawn Michaels, S-H-A-W-N. But let's go to the interview, and I want you to listen to this interview because it's really, really, it's kind of funny to me how they frame it for this match and the why and where he wants to go and then what they end up doing with Michaels. So let's give this one a listen real quick.
Another sensational victory for Shawn Michaels. Shawn, great match. Doug Pretty Boy Summers, a tough opponent.
That's right, a very tough opponent. But like I said last time, in order to be somebody in the world of professional wrestling, you have to beat the top competitors in the AWA. And Doug Summers is number one. And I'm going to go through everybody else to the best of my ability, straight to the top.
Where did you get that maneuver off the top rope? It looked to me like it looked like you were going to jump over the complete ring.
Well, to me, it's the best maneuver if you can keep the man down. Because once you come off that top rope with your full body weight, there isn't anybody that's going to get up from that.
All he has to do is bring a knee up and it's all over. Your amateur background so sensational. And again, your Rookie of the Year honors.
Yes, thank you very much. Like I said before, amateur background was from my father, and professional was from Jose Lothario. But right now, there's a Shawn Michaels on his own, and he's going to make it to the top of the AWA, no matter what it takes.
Competition and plenty of it. Trying to get to the champion, Stan the Lariat Hansen. A lot of people to go through.
That's right, a lot of people to go through, and the biggest and the best in professional wrestling are right here. But to be the best in professional wrestling, I've got to go through everybody else. And that's what I intend to do, straight to Stan Hansen. A big man and a great champion.
You heard it. Shawn Michaels, a very determined young man. Big future in the AWA.
There you have it. Right there. That is Shawn Michaels' first AWA TV interview in front of a live studio audience there at the Showboat. They keep flashing to the crowd during the interview. Most of them are older folks who are trying to figure him out. In fact, the first lady they look at, his glasses, gray hair, kind of smiling with a big smile on her face. And then they go to a random girl who looks more of what a Shawn Michaels fan you would expect from a Midnight Rocker standpoint, but it's mostly older generation there for the AWA which totally makes sense. And this episode really highlights some of the newer stars, some of the younger folks. But anyway, a couple weird things in this interview. Larry, where did you get that move? I mean, Larry, it was a splash off the top rope. That's how he won. It was also interesting to me they have him targeting Singles and Hansen, because on the previous episode that aired the week before on ESPN, Jannetty had debuted, and they spoke to him about forming a team with Michaels. And at the time, this is where I discovered that the Midnight Rockers' original name was supposed to be the U.S. Express, which obviously the WWF probably had a trademark on that. And what's also interesting about that is about a month or so, when Wrestle Rock comes out in AWA in 86, Wyndham and Rotundo, the U.S. Express, would actually be on the card facing the Fabulous Ones. So I don't know where they got the U.S. Express to start with, but anyway, they would end up being a Midnight Rockers very, very shortly after this interview. But obviously, Hansen versus Michaels never happens, as again, so the Rocker team starts immediately. But imagine Shawn Michaels taking on Stan Hansen at this point in time, and him framing them as a big star. That could have been something very, very interesting in the history books for that match. But anyway, we're going to go to our next match. And this match is also kind of weird because it has Curt Hennig and Marty Jannetty. And Curt Hennig at the time is one half of the World Tag Team titles with Scott Hall. They're champions. So Jannetty being here, teaming with Hennig, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And they're taking on Boris Zukov and Barbarian, and not the Barbarian per se that most of you know, but it's Nora the Barbarian, who would come on to be the Berzerker in 1992, and are managed by Sheik Adnan and Casey. All four, as you know, very well known later in the WWF, actually all five. Barbarian, like I said, is Berzerker, and he was apparently trained in commentary, they said, by Bruiser Brody. Marty's already in full rocker gear. Barbarian's already doing his husk yell. Hennig becomes Mr. Perfect, and Sheik Adnan goes on to manage Sergeant Slaughter during his infamous heel run in the 90s. So as far as the match, Hennig is very good, and the heels take control when he eats shit on the Barbarian kick to the face that looked very, very brutal. And the heels double team Hennig for a bit. Curt ducks a kick and chops the hell out of the Barbarian, and it gets Marty the tag. Works Barbarian's arms for a while. Barbarian does a backbreaker slam to the mat to Marty that looked very good. Zukov comes in, and clearly he's the rest hold guy. It's kind of like, what person doesn't fit in this match that actually makes the match good? That's Boris Zukov, and I feel like that's historically what his value is. All I'm going to say is think the Bolsheviks. Hennig and Barbarian go at it as... Anyway, going back at it, Hennig, like I said, looks awesome. He's doing chops and punches to Zukov. He is tripped by Adnan, and Scott Hall comes out. And then Hennig and Barbarian go at it as Curt tries to fight free. There's a big USA champ. Curt's chops are so loud, and then he eats shit out of Barbarian clothesline. Zukov in again, and he's a big bag of suck, but great. It's great watching Curt kick his ass as he gets ready to do a hot tag. Chaos ensues as Jannetty is tossed over the top rope by the heels. Hennig is tossed over the top rope by the heels for the DQ. The heels then toss Marty out. The faces come back in, and they drop kick Barbarian out of the ring and double backdrop to Zukov. Solid match until the end. Zukov stinks, but the other three carry this to a solid match, 2.5 stars. And you also get a one-off appearance from Scott Hall. So literally you got Scott Hall, Curt Hennig, just Marty Jannetty, 3 big future stars of the WWF within the next... Hennig's there in 88. Zukov goes in there in the Bolsheviks, I think around 88. And then Hall still not there until 92, but 3 future stars right there. And Jannetty's also there in 88. So you have 3 future stars here, plus Zukov, plus Barbarian. Nor the Barbarian comes in about the same time as Scott Hall does. So very, very interesting. And here's the thing I'll say, solid 2.5 stars. Even 14 months out from winning his first AWA World title in May of 87, Curt looks fantastic in the ring. And after the match, there's an interview with the heels and Adnan, which I'm not even going to bother playing the audio, because basically it's them wanting the tag team titles. They talk about Bruiser Brody, and what all that reminded me of is I don't understand why Barbarian's tagging with Zukov when him and Brody and the Barbarian could have been an awesome AWA tag team scene just because of how big they are and similar they are in styles. Barbarian brings up the Road Warriors, which is very random since the majority of the time they're in the NWA at this point. I do believe they'll be returning for Wrestle Rock for a cage match to blow off the Freebirds feud. And then he calls everyone sweat hogs. So the interview is garbage. So we're not going to play that for you. The next segment we have, though, is Larry's Corner. And I guess Larry had a weekly segment where he would do interviews. He's with Larry Nelson, and they would interview somebody. I believe the previous week, like I said, they brought up Marty Jannetty. That's where Jannetty brought up that they were going to do the Rockers tag team. But the big thing here is Larry had recently turned on Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel, career here, a heel in the AWA. And there was a match with Greg Gagne that Larry got a little aggressive with Greg, and apparently Nick Bockwinkel opposed it. Well, Nick Bockwinkel got beat up by Larry. He's out at this point, and Larry at this point had been suspended from wrestling in the ring for attacking Greg. So this interview is very interesting, and I want you to listen to it and sit back, listen to it. About 8 minutes long. Yeah, that's a long time to listen in an interview, but I want you to listen who the interview's with, what it's about, some of the stuff you hear in the interview, and then I'll be back to talk about the interview right after you guys listen to it. So here you go.
Welcome to In This Corner, featuring Larry Zbyszko. I'm Larry Nelson, and this week, our special guest, a surprise for you, Mr. Zbyszko.
Not surprises, so just spill it out.
A man who has participated at every level of wrestling and been a champion all along the way. A high school champion, a man who was 4 times the Big Ten heavyweight champion, a man who was twice the NCAA collegiate champion, an Olympic wrestler,
Jeff Blotnick or
the professional heavyweight champion of the world. Do you have any idea who I'm talking about yet?
Brad Rannigan's.
The man who critics across the world agree, the greatest of all time. Our guest, a personal hero of mine, the one and only Vern Gagne.
I don't want Vern Gagne on this show. Who gave you the authority to put Vern Gagne on this show? I don't care, producer, no, Bruce, let me tell you something. The man is instrumental in my suspension. He's cost me money. Ever since I cold-cocked this kid, I've been getting nothing but grief from this upper echelon, and I don't want to take this crap. Let me make something else clear. I don't want him on this show, Larry, and who do you think you ought to have him on this?
Vern Gagne.
2-3 times I've been trying to get, and you know I'm dead set against Vern Gagne.
Vern Gagne, a man I've been trying to get on this show since it started. Take a look at this. Ever since this program began, I have been trying to get the producer of AWA Championship Wrestling on this show, none other than the one and only Vern Gagne. The problem is, this is an independent segment, and Larry Zbyszko has time after time refused every attempt I've had to get you on here, Vern, and let me tell you, this is a great privilege for me to finally have you out here. As you can see, Mr. Zbyszko wasn't very happy.
Well, I am rather delighted that chair is empty, and I'm happy the fact that when my name was mentioned, he disappeared.
Very quickly, 1985, a sensational year for the AWA. Can you give me an idea of where we're going in 1986?
Well, I think wrestling, all of wrestling, I think everyone's aware of that. It's certainly in the forefront of the sporting news all over the world, not only in America, but we're certainly talking about wrestling in Japan. You've got to talk about the excitement that it creates over there and the great crowds it's drawing. It is I think the #1 sport there in that country. And here it's fast becoming, or at least our ratings are higher than many places in baseball and many times in football. And certainly more than hockey, and basketball. So where it's going is it's been going and going up, and I think it's going to continue going up.
Well, the AWA, the largest wrestling organization in the world, just leaps and bounds growth here.
Well, but as I said, wrestling has always been more than just a national sport here in America. It's been worldwide, except for behind the Iron Curtain. And it's a great sport. Wrestling, our style that is developed here in America, takes place all over the world, rather. Except, as I said, behind the Iron Curtain, where their amateurs are maybe 30, anywhere from 25 to 45 years old. So they have no place to go in those countries, as our amateurs do, to flow into professional sports.
If I could, just a moment, I very rarely have a chance to talk to someone who is an expert on amateur wrestling, as you are. Now, what do you see as the major force in amateur wrestling now?
Well, on the collegiate level, certainly you have to go along with the University of Iowa. They've dominated with Dan Gable as their head coach here, I think, for the last 6 or 7 years. And I'm sure this next NCAA tournament, which will be held in March at Iowa City, that Iowa City, at Iowa University Wrestling Club is going to be very tough to beat. Oklahoma is very strong. Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Wisconsin. Russ Hellickson down there at Wisconsin is doing an excellent job. California teams are coming on strong. You got some great teams in Pennsylvania. In upstate New York. The amateur wrestling in America is growing by leaps and bounds also, both on the collegiate high school level. We also have our great amateurs who are beyond that, and that's of course, our freestylers who go for the Olympic teams, and our Greco-Roman wrestlers.
And of course, you've been accomplished at every level, high school, collegiate, professional. I'd like to talk a little bit about the professional championship now, a title which you held with such dignity for so long. Then we had Nick Bockwinkel, a good wrestler.
Very fine wrestler. Very
Rick
tough.
Martel, a classy wrestler.
Excellent. More than classy. These guys are, when you're world champion, you're more than a classy or an expert. You're the top of your league. You're the top of your sport. You're the best there is. And I can't make light about Nick Bockwinkel, because I had so many tough matches with him over the years. And Rick Martel. And Rick, I don't think was given the complete credit he should have, because Rick was a tremendous hard trainer. He had an excellent background in wrestling and trainers to put him where he was. And he won that title at a very young age, which a lot of people have not done. I think he was 26 years old when he won the title. But he had been wrestling professionally, at least started his training when he was 16 years old in professional wrestling. Now we have a different type of wrestler, and I'm not that all pleased with it, but he's there. He won the title and defeated Rick Martel in the Meadowlands in New Jersey, and that's, of course, Stan the Lariat Hansen.
Rick Martel injured just a few nights earlier before that match, and I've seen the tapes. Hansen won the title in controversy, and he's kept it there ever since.
That's right, it was. I saw both matches. I saw the one where Rick hurt his back, and then, of course, the one at the Meadowlands. And I can't say I was pleased with the Lariat's tactics.
Whatever. I'm very pleased.
Because I got other weapons in my arsenal than nunchucker. I got contracts, legal contracts. This is my segment. And you, sir, will never be on my segment again.
I could care less being on your segment
lesser.
for what you did to my son and to Nick Bockwinkel. There's no place in wrestling. I don't care what sport you're talking about. No place. I was ashamed to be associated with professional wrestling after I saw what he did, not only to my son, but to Nick Bockwinkel.
It has been my extreme honor to have the best that ever was, Vern Gagne, on this corner. We'll be back.
Thank you, Larry.
I hope that interview didn't take anybody away. 8 minutes, and the majority of it being Vern Gagne, I could see could totally be a defeat of a podcast. But here's a couple things I wanted to point out. The 80s porn music, why we once watched a bunch of Vern clips of him beating up the likes of Bockwinkel, Blackwell, Adnan, the Blackjacks, took me out a little bit. Vern really, history really shows it. And anytime I watch something with him in it or something he talks in, it really shows he likes to toot himself every chance he gets. I could probably use a better term than toot, but I'll keep it politically correct here. Vern Gagne really loves himself. And if you remember the show we did on his retirement where he made it a big deal, he got like the Minnesota State, like to honor him, key to the city, whatever the bullshit. And then he kept the belt only for Nick Bockwinkel to get awarded it anyway, so his ego could retire as champion. Larry's reaction to him is fantastic about him being on his show. I love that. Vern talking about his big ratings versus the other sports, and Larry filleting how big. Larry Nelson filleting how big the AWA is in comparison to other sports and other wrestling. Like, just a sheer ego show here for Vern. Vern still wanting to push amateur wrestling to make him looking legit at 86 is something. He does do a good job of selling Hansen and Martel as the champions, but I do like it with Larry wrapping it up to get Vern off the fucking show. 8 minutes of this. I apologize. Out of all the historic value that's in this show, I think the biggest thing for me in this is I love Larry Zbyszko being Larry Zbyszko. He's just in there cutting promos. He's a hot heel at the moment because he had turned on Bockwinkel. Bockwinkel hasn't returned yet, so they're set up to do a big feud. But Vern Gagne still having to be relevant in 1986 when he technically retired for the first time in 1981. And still having to be relevant here in 1986 is something. I guess you could call him the OG Vince McMahon of having the biggest ego in wrestling. So with that, we're going to move on to our next segment.
From Denver, Colorado, Leon, the Baby Bull White. Standing just outside the ring, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, returning to the AWA after a lengthy suspension, weighing in at 243 pounds.
Knock off the small talk. I want Scott Ledoux out of here. You're the commissioner. Get him out.
From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Larry Zbyszko.
So yes, there you have Larry Zbyszko being introduced. He's coming back from his suspension, I guess right after they did this editing of his segment there. But he is back, and you heard he's taken on Leon White. Well, what many of you may not know, or probably a lot of you do, is Leon White is actually the future Big Van Vader. And we go right to this match where it's Larry taking on Big Van Vader. Larry White, he had some really good matches here. He had many with Stan Hansen that ultimately would go on to spur some of their feud they had when they went to Japan, but you have it here in the AWA. They have multiple matches together. He also had many matches here with Bruiser Brody, with the Barbarian. He had a match with Marty Jannetty. And Leon White here started his career in the AWA right after football, and he was trained by Bragg Renegades. And he debuted in a Battle Royal in the AWA on October 18th, 1985. So for those of you that did not know, the other historical context for me in this one is you get a Larry Zbyszko match versus the future Big Van Vader, who ultimately debuted in AWA. So really think about who we've talked about tonight. You've had Kurt Hennig, you've had Scott Hall, you've had the debut of Shawn Michaels, you've had Marty Jannetty. Now you have Big Van Vader in a Random March episode, 1986, ESPN. Really think about the historical context of that. Anyway, the match. Vader, Baby Bull, they're calling him at the time, is wearing a trucker hat, and Larry's wearing a Cobra Kai-like robe because at the time, I believe his gimmick is he's like a nunchuck master. Many of you might remember if you ever watched old AWA, he's constantly flicking around nunchucks in his little Cobra Kai gi. The crowd hates Larry, as you heard, as most people beside me do. The ref here is Scott Ledoux, who Larry also had a feud with. Famous feud there. Maybe we can cover that some other time. Not one of my favorites here. But Leon is referred to as the Baby Bull at this point. Him with hair is also something. Gagne sells what will happen when Bockwinkel comes back. So they're selling that whole Larry turn on Bockwinkel, what will happen when he comes back. There's a lot of stalling by Larry very early on here, but then White finally grabs a headlock as Greg continues to brag about Leon versus Hansen and what that match title could do one day for them. Pretty good for sightseeing, maybe, I guess. And then he talks about the title match here today. Bull hits an amazing Oklahoma Stampede and a big elbow on Zbyszko. Then he misses a splash, and Barry beats him down with kicks. But White comes back with some stiff forearms and a headbutt. very Vader-esque, if you know what I'm talking about. He does a bunch of stiff turnbuckle shots to Larry's head on the turnbuckles. Then he does a random spinning elbow. Think about the Jericho's spinning elbow move that he does in AEW, and think about it coming from Vader. That's what he did. And then he did a big, huge Bundy splash. The crowd goes absolutely nuts. And then Larry goes outside, and Bull kicks his ass outside. But then Larry randomly rakes the eyes, and Larry gets a cheap count-out win over the future Big Van Vader. White comes back in the ring, and he does this huge press slam on Larry. The ending was absolute shit. The aftermatch was great, but White looked like a true star. Larry sold like a motherfucker for him. This is awesome early Vader kicking ass, and you could tell he would be a star one day. And Larry did a phenomenal job. Even though he won, he did a phenomenal job of playing his chicken shit heel. And actually selling like hell for Leon White. So I really enjoyed this match. I think I'd probably give it maybe 2 1/4 for just because of how long it was, but really good early sight into what would eventually become Big Van Vader with a star that could really get him over. So then after that, we had an interview with Larry. So let's listen to that interview.
Leon Baby Bull White counted out outside the ring. Thus your winner, Larry Zbyszko. Now
I love all you fools too, you know.
I want you to tell me how you can say Scott Ledoux is a prejudiced referee after this decision.
People, I don't know how big of fools these people are. But you have to be stupid not to realize that Ledoux is nothing but Bockwinkel's thug. Hey, why are you laughing? You should know better than anybody. Hey, the man's biased. The man's trying to grab at some straws to make some money, seeing his boxing career is down the tube. Hey, why don't you shut up?
Scott Ledoux.
Can't say is this. These people can act like idiots if they want to. I have proven it's the science. It's not the brawn. It's not 375 pounds that wins the match. It's this. It's 12 glorious. Knock it off. These 12 glorious years. It's an experience of dedication and of this. I have a brain, people. Not like you.
Well, it doesn't look like that he has changed his attitude one bit since the...
I'm a winner. I'm victorious. I have nothing to change, brother. The wrestlers who come up against me ain't gonna change. They're gonna stick to the rules. They want to wrestle like Leon White. That's good. I'll be the winner. If they want to cheat like Nick Bockwinkel,
Stand the Lariat Hansen defending the title against David Sammartino.
A classic Larry interview there. Larry shitting on Ledoux and Bockwinkel. By the way, Larry's dirty blonde hair is something, and his hate of people is amazing as he yells at the crowd. Really, no point to this interview, but more or less Larry just being a classic asshole. So this is it. So here we are. We are set up to go into our main event. And like I brought up earlier tonight, it is David Sammartino versus Stan the Lariat Hansen for the AWA World title. Now we're going to play some audio, 2 pieces of audio. There is Larry, who's about to pimp the world title match, and we're also going to get some really random music as they look at Hansen. Then we're going to go to the audio of the opening of this match. And then I'll come back, the opening audio of the match in which Gagne actually pimps the match the way it probably should have been pimped, but not necessarily in the moment of the match, because it probably should have been pimped the way it needed to be pimped prior to the match. So let's listen to both pieces of the audio. Larry and Nelson open it up, and then kind of the opening moments a little bit with Greg Gagne on commentary.
Our main event this week is a battle for the heavyweight championship of the world. Stan the Lariat Hansen, the wild man out of Borger, Texas, the heavyweight champion who has terrorized everybody in the AWA, including me, will be defending against the young, strong man from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, David Sammartino. And this should be, or at least could be, an absolute classic. Now, before we get to that match, I want you to take a very special look at the heavyweight champion of the world, Stan the Lariat Hansen. And now you know why they call the heavyweight champion of the world the Wild Man. Stan the Lariat Hansen, a very special look at him. David Sammartino from Pittsburgh, the son of Bruno Sammartino, a man who has battled all the greats all over the world. A very strong, serious student of wrestling, this young man, and he should be able to test and defeat Stan the Lariat Hansen. It will be a sensational match for the heavyweight championship of the world. You stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Well, Ken, this is the one we've been talking about for weeks. David Sammartino, a few years back, Stan Hansen, Madison Square Garden, faced Bruno Sammartino, broke the neck of Bruno Sammartino, and since that time and place, Bruno never got his crack at Hansen. Young David has got a lot of revenge in his heart today, and a lot of people are saying this is the man that's going to take the title from Stan Hansen. Well, this one's going to be...
So the premise of this match, obviously, is David Sammartino having revenge for his father against Stan Hansen, the guy who broke his neck many, many years ago. With Larry Nelson on the preview here, it's kind of tough. They're selling David Sammartino to have an ability to beat Stan Hansen to me is something. The crazy thing is we're going to give it a little background on some things, and then we're going to play an interview, two interviews with Bruno and with Stan Hansen to kind of talk about the neck-breaking incident. But again, them selling this as David having the ability to beat Hansen is something. The crazy thing is David was only here for this taping. So let me give you some background on this. He had one other match versus Hansen on a house show back on February 4th. That was in Utah. Sammartino's last WWF match was in November of '85 when he famously took a pin to a jobber named Ron Shaw. I think I talked about it at the beginning on a live Prism show on purpose in November. But after that match, he wouldn't wrestle again. Until this TV taping. And then even after this TV taping, he would go right back to the WWF in May 24th. So literally 2 matches in the AWA, all multiple months apart, and then he would go right back to the WWF. So it's a really random match that you would think as a booker, you would book and pimp for months as a revenge build for David for what Stan did to his dad. But it's just here on a random ESPN drop that they just pimp, as you heard at the beginning of the show, especially with Greg on commentary. By the way, I do have to say, I think Resnick and Greg were really, really good on commentary tonight. Greg, to me, is very underestimated in a lot of former fashion, but he's actually really good on the commentary as well. So, I mean, if you think about something like this today, let's say, like randomly, if David Sammartino versus Stan Hansen were to happen in today's world, it would be built up for months and weeks to a big pay-per-view event where David would look to get revenge for his father. And just weird to put it like on a random ESPN show and then to pimp it during the show versus build up. And I do have a take on that as we get into the match here a little later. But anyway, so let's take a listen to some of the audio from interviews with Bruno and Stan on what actually happened with the neck-breaking incident to kind of give you guys some context around why this is kind of a big deal revenge match. So give this a listen.
Stepping over this time, Hansen on his feet, adjusting that elbow, slams him down to the canvas.
I am the man who broke your neck, Bruno. Every morning you got to get up, brother, and look in the mirror and think that Texan did it and got away with it.
He called me at the hospital, and he hesitated. He called me after I'd been 3 weeks in the hospital. He called because he was so nervous and concerned about it. And I said to him, I said, Stan, I said, we're big boys. We know what we got into. We got into wrestling. Wrestling is, we like it, but it's a dangerous thing. I said, this wasn't your fault. Please, I said, think nothing of it. I said, my God, don't let it. And he felt very relieved that I had that approach. And what other approach could you really have?
One night I'm wrestling in Knox City, Texas, and the next week I'm working Madison Square Garden, the greatest venue of all time, you know. And I didn't think I was nervous, but maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, I don't know.
Sammartino on the canvas, and Stan Hansen perhaps wins his victory. Hansen now, with Sammartino on his feet. The living legend now, whips to the rope, waiting for him once again. Again, comeback. Stan Hansen in control of the match, the crowd rooting for the great legend that gets back to his feet.
I slammed Bruno on the back of his head and broke his neck, and Vince Sr. looks could have killed. I would have been dead, you know. He was shocked, you know, and I felt really, really horrible too. I mean, I mean, here's the guy. He brought me in sight unseen, right? And then I ended up hurting him, putting him out.
And all the boys were mad, too, because that was their meal ticket, was Bruno.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm sure they were. Ivan Koloff, Ernie Ladd, and Billy Superstar Graham. Those are the 3 top guys in the whole country at that time. And, you know, I'm sure that they were really upset and mad, you know, because I took money off their plate because they can't work in Boston and Philly and every place with Bruno. But to my face, I never saw them show that animosity. But I appreciate that because that would have been really hard.
I love listening to that interview because the neck breaking was clearly an accident. They turned it into an angle, as you heard Stan Hansen in the opening promo there. But it was also interesting to hear about it was an accident and how it impacted Hansen and how others felt like they took work away from them because of what Hansen did to Bruno. So really, really good interview there. Good kind of context around the breaking of the neck, but that really, really sets this match up. And again, this should be a huge, huge revenge tour kind of thing. So anyway, so let's talk about the match. And what we'll do is we're going to talk about the match. Then we're going to play you the audio from the match to go up to the end. And then I'm also going to play you the after-match promo. But first up, let's talk about the match. So Hansen here looks just legit insane. And if anyone remembers late 80s Hansen, just with the bull rope, just wild as hell and just crazy, like very untraditional AWA champion when you think about like Vern Gagne, or you think about Nick Bockwinkel. He's very, very untraditional world champion. Even Rick Martel, he's a great wrestler. So oddly enough for me, my very first time watching Hansen actually physically was when he took on Lex Luger for the U.S. title at Halloween Havoc 1990, and he actually won it. I, of course, had seen and read about him in a lot of the aftermags over the time, but when I saw him in that match with Luger, I immediately loved his wild nature, and of course, since I've gone back and watched a lot of his matches, including a lot of the ones from Japan. Also funny is he seemed to bail on WCW the same as he did the AWA, but that's a whole nother separate conversation. Greg, like you heard on audio earlier, immediately picked up the neck break, and David takes control with a sick chop and an arm drag, and literally on commentary, Greg is making David sound like he is the GOAT of all time in comparison to his father, which is a little bit ridiculous. David works the arm for a bit. Kurt Hennig comes out on commentary as he wants to study the match because he also had a great match with Hansen that's also on AWA TV that you guys should check out. Hennig versus Hansen, very underrated, very, very, very good match you can find on YouTube as well. There's a nice arm drag that David does into a slam as Kurt talks about wanting the winner. Stan is awesome as he's trying to get out of the arm bar, rubbing his elbow to David's face, just savagely trying to escape the arm bar while they're all down on the mat. He eventually does by getting a headbutt to escape. Hansen hits a gross knee drop. Then he does a throwing body slam where he literally throws Sammartino across the ring. And Sammartino is not a small guy here. He's big, he's stout, looks like a power wrestler there for a minute. He does an awesome chop and throw to the other corner. Hansen then does a rear chin lock. There's a stiff forearm to David's chest that leaves a freaking red mark. David works the arm again as Greg does a great job outlining all the contenders that are there for Stan Hansen once he gets past this match. Hansen then crushes David's head with a leg scissors. These guys really lay it into each other and do not hold back. And I love the balance in this match of limb work, mat work, and stiff shots by both. And there's a lot of potatoes for sure. The other thing is in this, you get the kind of the first pimping by Greg announcing next week's show. You will hear about Wrestle Rock 86 next week. Hansen throws David into the chairs outside and he curses at the fans. And when he curses at the fans, the sound is actually faded out. Hansen is actually very, very relentless with his intensity. David is actually bleeding from his nose at this point. David mounts a good comeback with some false pins and slams, but we're going to take it to the audio from here with the finish of the match. And then we're going to play you the after promo that Hansen does after the match. And then we'll come back and talk about both.
The splash. Two. Beautiful. Sammartino, talk about resiliency, able to throw him off. Training this weekend, Sammartino bench pressed 555 pounds. Out of two. This is twice in a row. It was a beautiful cradle. Body slam. Look at the strength of Sammartino. That was dead weight he picked up. Sammartino going for the ropes.
Really showing me something. If you do take it to Stan Hansen, you can stay with him. Oh.
Body slam off that top rope. Boy, this match has just been back and forth.
Both wrestlers showing a lot here.
Oh, flying drop kick. I've never seen that from Hansen.
I've never seen that.
There's a wrestling move, the man drop kick. He's over 300 pounds. This is also something I've got to study if ever going to meet up with this man.
He gave the signal for the lariat. Off the rope comes Sammartino. Oh. There it is.
This is the move that he broke Bruno's neck with.
No.
He got him.
I don't believe it.
A flying drop kick from Stan Hansen. Greg never did I think would see that.
This man very, very, very tough. He's going to be a very tough man to beat, but Sammartino did show me one thing, and that's the reason I'm out here for. He did show me if you stay with Stan Hansen move for move, he might get tired, he might slow down, he might make a bad move, or you might get your break. So right now, Greg Gagne, Ken Resnick, thank you very much for having me out here.
Well, the mistake Sammartino made there, he didn't follow up on Hansen. He went up to that top rope. Hansen caught him with that body slam off the top rope. Now, this is the move he broke his father Bruno's neck with, and he about took David's head off. David is still out up there. Kurt.
The winner, and still the heavyweight champion of the world, Stan the Lariat Hansen. Stan Hansen, one of the toughest matches I've ever seen you have to go against.
Well, let me tell you something. I never had nothing but tough matches. I got to give something to you, David Sammartino. Your daddy would be proud of you. But that's what I think of your damn daddy. We're talking about anybody who wants the world's championship belt. It's Stan Hansen, and here I stay.
Kurt Hennig has issued a challenge to the winner of this match before it took place. So did his tag team partner, Big Scott Hall. So is Leon Baby Bull White. They're all after you.
You know something? First of all, I'm going to celebrate just a little bit. For my little girl Paige back there in Texas and my boy John, I can finally buy you some new shoes because I won a match. As for all these other guys all around, come on, brother. You know, Kurt Hennig, he was up here a little while ago, a couple weeks back, acting smart, and I damn near put him out of wrestling forever. And he's got that big pumped up, blown air Scott Hall coming down. Are they the World Tag Team Champions or what?
Yes, they are.
Well, then why don't they ever wrestle in a tag team? Why are they after me all the time? I'm standing here, but there's a big long line. David Sammartino, you were first. Kurt Hennig, you want to be number 2? Throw your damn name in the pot. Scott Hall, how about you? Hey, Greg Gagne, maybe you can come out too. Whatever the case may be, everybody all over the world knows Stan Hansen. I'm controversial, but I'm damn mean, and I'm going to keep this belt, the world belt.
This match was fantastic, guys. And if anyone's perception of David is skewed because of his father, because his father was a GOAT, or because of David's WWF run that many consider pretty disappointing, you got to go watch this match. You will not be disappointed. I'd actually go 3.5 on this. It's just a damn shame for me. As if they had to build this as a big revenge type feel, with the right build, totally could have pulled off this being the world title match at Wrestle Rock, which they're pimping as their next show, versus just putting a random TV match on like their ESPN show. Like, this could have main evented. Like, this match was really, really good. And again, it might be, it almost feels like a shit take to say how good this match was, but they just potatoed each other. They were stiff. David looked really, really good, and it could have been a really good revenge type of match on a big show, especially for AWA in 1986. But I really enjoyed it, so really go out of your way to find this match. And then you heard the post-audio match where Kurt is actually at ringside helping David. Oh, but the other thing in the match, by the way, the commentary is really, really good between Kurt Resnick, between Gagne. Just the dynamic of it's really, really good. But then the promo afterwards, Kurt's at ringside helping David up. Stan praising David at the same time saying he can now buy his kids shoes and shitting on Kurt and Scott. And kind of like that next generation is fantastic. Then he yelled at Greg at ringside. What a find this was at the time of the AWA. Had so many future Hall of Famers early in their career. Like, just think about what we talked about here tonight. The debut of Shawn Michaels, an almost ready for the world title Kurt Hennig, Scott Hall, years before he's even Razor Ramon, Larry being at his most Larryest, early Vader looking like a hoss, Hansen, a totally different world champion versus what the AWA is used to, and a shocking and surprising banger against David Sammartino that the AWA really should have made a big deal and build. And who knows what could have been coming out of this. So if you really skip the Vern Gagne shit because he never could resist putting himself over, this episode's 100% worth going on YouTube and watching. This whole episode from start to finish is really great with the exception of the Vern segment. And the Vern segment you can probably consider pretty good too, just for the cheesy ass music and video clips you see of him and realize why he would need 8 minutes for that for himself in 1986 when it's clear they're building younger stars here on a journey to Wrestle Rock 1986. So that is it. So that is Sammartino versus Hansen and the March 11th, 1986 of AWA. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this pod as much as I enjoyed watching the show. So to end the pod tonight, we are going to play a song from that week of March 1986. That was the #1 song. And this song is by Starship. And Starship had come back, obviously, in a big way with We Built This City on Rock and Roll and couple other songs, but this one, Sarah, I think is probably one of their most underrated songs. It came out the same week, was #1 here this week of the AWA show we're talking about. So until then, we will see all of you on the next episode of Territorial. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.